Before we dive into this chilling tale, make sure to hit like and subscribe for more spine-tingling stories. You won't want to miss the true, dark accounts I'm about to share. So sit tight and let's begin. I always thought a change of scenery was the answer to everything. That's what I told myself when I packed up my bags and headed out to that old farmhouse with my wife, Emma, and our teenage son, Charlie. We needed a fresh start, something to pull us away from the city noise and pressures, something peaceful. Maybe it was the burnout, maybe it was the constant stress, but this farmhouse was supposed to be our escape. Little did I know, it was only the beginning of something much worse. As we pulled up to the property, I tried to shake off the weird feeling I couldn't quite place. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and old wood. The farmhouse, with its chipped paint and sagging roof, stood in front of us like a giant waiting to swallow us whole. Emma was excited, talking non-stop about all the renovations we could do, but I just couldn't ignore the heaviness in the air. It was like the place had been waiting for us. Charlie, of course, wasn't having it. His headphones were in, his eyes glued to his phone, clearly irritated that his summer vacation had been reduced to a dusty old house in the middle of nowhere. He didn't want this life. I could see it in his face, but I didn't care. We'd make it work. At least that's what I told myself. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. We ate dinner, chatted about what we'd do tomorrow, and slowly started to settle into our rooms. I took the upstairs bedroom while Emma grabbed the one next door. Charlie chose the room at the far end of the hall. There was something strange about that room, something cold and off-putting, but I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to sound paranoid. It was just an old house, right? But as we all settled into bed, the house seemed to wake up. I heard it first, the sound of something dragging along the floorboards, a slow, deliberate scrape that made my spine tighten. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling, the weight of the years pressing down. But then I heard it. Again, closer this time. The scraping sound grew louder, like something or someone was moving through the dark hallway outside our door. I got up, tiptoeing down the hall. I reached the stairs and froze. I could feel it like eyes were on me, watching, waiting. I looked down, and for a second, I thought I saw something at the bottom of the stairs. A shadow no bigger than a person, but it wasn't moving. It was just standing there. I blinked, and it was gone. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that scratching sound again. And then, in the silence, there was something else. A faint whisper, so quiet I almost couldn't make it out. But it was there, just beyond my hearing. Go. That was it. Go. I didn't tell Emma. She'd think I was crazy. And besides, I was probably just tired. But as the night dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That sound wasn't just the house settling. And those whispers, they didn't belong to me. By morning, the fear had started to sink in. Something had changed. It was almost like the house itself was waiting for us to settle in, to let our guard down. Emma tried to be cheerful, but even she couldn't ignore the strange heaviness in the air. And Charlie, well, he wasn't talking much, but I could tell. Something was off with him, too. He'd barely said a word since we arrived, but we pushed through, determined to make the best of it. We started unpacking the boxes in the living room, setting up things around the house. Emma was excited to explore the old barn behind the house, and I figured I'd take a walk around the property. It wasn't much, but I needed to clear my head. That's when I met Mrs. Dolan. She appeared out of nowhere, walking down the dirt road toward us. I didn't even hear her coming. She looked ancient, her face like a withered mask, skin stretched tight over her bones. Her eyes, though, those eyes, they were sharp, like she could see straight through me. She stopped at the gate and just stared for a long moment. Her voice, when it came, was raspy, like someone who had smoked their entire life. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her eyes never leaving me. "This place is cursed. It's not for you. Leave before it's too late." I didn't know how to respond. Emma smiled politely, trying to brush it off, but the woman wasn't going anywhere. She just stood there, staring at us, as if waiting for us to leave. "Cursed?" Emma laughed nervously. "That's just superstition, right?" The woman shook her head. "It's not superstition, dear. The past never forgets. It will come for you, just like it came for them." Her voice dropped to a whisper, but there was something unsettling about it. She wasn't talking about the house. She wasn't talking about anything normal. But before I could ask more, she turned and left as quickly as she came, disappearing back into the mist that surrounded the property. I didn't know what to make of it. The whole interaction felt wrong, and the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. I should have listened to her, but I didn't. The next day, the house felt even more oppressive. The walls seemed to close in on us, the air thick with a sense of unease. I tried to shake it off, tried to tell myself it was just the weirdness of moving into a new place, the stress of change. But I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was watching us, waiting for us to slip up. Emma was still trying to make the best of things. She spent most of the day cleaning up the kitchen, scrubbing away the dust and cobwebs that had gathered over the years. Charlie stayed mostly in his room, headphones on, eyes glued to his phone. I was fine with that. He needed time to adjust. Or so I told myself. I wandered around the property, trying to get a better sense of the land we'd now call home. The place was quiet, too quiet. Not the kind of peace you find in nature, but an eerie stillness, like the land was holding its breath. I found myself walking to the edge of the woods that bordered the farmhouse. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches twisted and gnarled, as if they had witnessed something they shouldn't. I didn't know why, but something about those woods felt wrong. There was a darkness there, something ancient and far too aware. I turned back toward the house, trying to ignore the unease crawling up my spine. As I walked, I noticed something on the ground, a small, weathered wooden doll. It was out of place, lying right in front of the farmhouse, its cracked face staring up at me, its tiny hands clasped as if in prayer. I picked it up, examining. It felt oddly cold to the touch, as if it had been there far longer than it should have. I didn't want to think about it. Just another weird thing in an old house, right? But as I stood there holding it, a chill ran through me. That night, everything changed. The house was quiet at first. Too quiet. We sat around the dinner table, eating in awkward silence. The atmosphere felt heavy, like something was just about to happen, but we couldn't quite place it. The usual sounds of a home laughter, clinking silverware, the hum of a refrigerator seemed absent. All I could hear was the wind outside, howling through the broken windows and rattling the wooden frames. Charlie was the first one to notice. He'd been staring at the doorway leading into the hallway, his face pale. His eyes flicked to me, then back to the door. I followed his gaze but saw nothing. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Charlie didn't answer right away. Instead, he just shook his head, like he was trying to convince himself it wasn't real. But then, it came again, the scraping noise. I froze. I knew exactly what it was, the same noise I had heard the night before. I turned to Emma, but she was already standing up, looking confused. "What is that?" She whispered. I didn't want to say it out loud, but I could feel it deep in my gut. It wasn't just the house settling. Something was here. We tried to ignore it. We tried to laugh it off, like it was nothing. But the sound continued, slow, rhythmic, like something dragging itself across the floor. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. "Charlie, stay here," I ordered, but he was already moving toward the hall. I could hear him breathing fast, almost like he was afraid to breathe too loudly. I followed him, trying to keep calm, but my hands were shaking. We reached the hallway, and I could hear the sound coming from the basement. A dragging sound, like something heavy was being pulled across the concrete floor. I grabbed the old flashlight from the kitchen, and together we crept toward the basement door. The smell of mildew hit me hard as I touched the cold brass knob. I hesitated. Something about that basement. It felt wrong, like whatever was down there. It didn't want to be found. Charlie stepped forward. "Let's just see what it is," he muttered under his breath, but as soon as he opened the door, the sound stopped. We both stood there, staring into the dark abyss below us. The flashlight didn't cut through the blackness. It felt like the dark was swallowing the light. The temperature seemed to drop instantly. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was down there, just waiting for us to make a move. Charlie, the bravest of us, stepped forward first. "I'm going down," he said, but there was something in his voice that didn't sound like confidence. "No," I said quickly. "We'll go together." But before I could stop him, he had already stepped onto the first step, his foot making a soft creak as it landed. The noise came back then. The whispering. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but when I strained to listen, I could make out words. They were faint but unmistakable. "Go. Go." I grabbed Charlie's arm and pulled him back, but he didn't resist. He was already trembling. "Dad, did you hear that?" His voice was barely a whisper, but I could hear the fear in it. Before I could answer, the door slammed shut behind us. We turned, and there, standing at the edge of the hallway, was a figure, a woman. Her face was pale, her hair long and tangled, hanging in front of her eyes. She didn't move, but I could feel her eyes on me, watching, waiting. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Then, her lips parted, and in a voice like dry leaves rustling, she said, "You shouldn't have come." The figure stood in the hallway, her presence so still, it felt as though time had stopped. I couldn't look away from her, not because I wanted to, but because my body refused to move. A chill gripped me, cold, biting, unnatural. Charlie was trembling beside me, his wide eyes fixed on the woman, but he couldn't speak. Neither could I. The silence between us and the woman stretched on, unbearable, until it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Her lips moved again, but this time, it was like her voice came from everywhere. "You shouldn't be here. You don't belong." It wasn't a command, but a warning, and it sent a deep, primal fear straight to my core. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It was like the very air was pressing down on me, suffocating me. The woman didn't move, but her eyes, those eyes pierced me. There was something deeply unsettling about them. They weren't just empty or cold. They seemed knowing, like she could see all my thoughts, every fear I had ever tried to bury. I swallowed hard, trying to force myself to speak, to ask her who she was, but nothing came out. Instead, the air around me felt thick like it was closing in. Charlie must have felt it too, because without warning, he stepped back, his breath shallow. "We need to go," he whispered, voice cracking. But before I could grab his arm and pull him away, the woman raised one hand. "You cannot leave," she said, the words like ice, sharp and final. And then, a sound, the scraping sound came. Again, it wasn't from the basement this time. It came from within the walls, like something was trying to claw its way out from the inside. The sound grew louder and louder, but I couldn't move. I didn't know what to do. Fear held me in place, but finally, after what felt like an eternity, I managed to speak. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely audible, my throat dry and tight. She didn't answer. Instead, she simply stared at me. Her eyes didn't blink, didn't shift. The tension was unbearable. And then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. I don't know what happened next. One moment, she was there, and the next, it was as though she had never been. The hallway was empty. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and the house fell silent again, but not in a peaceful way. It was too quiet, like the world had stopped moving. I could still feel her eyes, still hear her words echoing in my mind. "You don't belong." I turned to Charlie. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what. How do you explain what we had just seen? I didn't want to believe it, but I could tell from the look in Charlie's eyes that he wasn't imagining it. He had seen the woman too. We both had. "Let's just go upstairs," I said, trying to sound normal, trying to hold on to whatever sense of control I had left. But Charlie didn't move. He was staring at the stairs, a strange, distant look on his face. I followed his gaze, and that's when I saw it. The doll. The same doll I had found earlier, the one I had picked up outside. It was now sitting on the bottom step of the stairs, facing us, its tiny eyes staring right into mine. I didn't know how it had gotten there. I hadn't seen it when we came down, but now it was unmistakable. Its head tilted slightly to the side, as though it were alive, watching us. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. It felt like the house was pulling us in, drawing us deeper into its web, like it had decided we were part of its story now. But I had no idea what kind of story we had walked into. "Dad, it's moving," Charlie whispered. I looked at him. His eyes were locked on the doll, and for a moment, I thought he had lost his mind. But then I saw it too. The doll's tiny hands, those cold, stiff hands, moved just a fraction of an inch, as if it were trying to reach out to us. "Get away from it," I said, backing away, grabbing Charlie's arm and pulling him towards the stairs. But it wasn't just the doll that was strange anymore. It was the whole damn house. It felt as though something in the walls was alive, something ancient, something that was aware of us. Watching, waiting. I could hear footsteps now. But these were not our footsteps. They were slower, heavier, and they echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls and creating an eerie, distorted rhythm. I looked at Charlie, and he looked back at me, his eyes wide, his breath shallow. "Dad, I don't want to be here anymore." Neither did I, but the house had already decided. We didn't know what to do. The doll, still sitting on the step, was the least of our worries now. The footsteps, heavy, deliberate, had grown louder, and they were coming from above us. They weren't normal footsteps either. They were slow, as if whoever was walking didn't have any sense of urgency, like they were simply waiting for us to notice them, waiting for us to understand that we weren't alone. The house wasn't just haunted, it was alive. "Dad." Charlie's voice shook, and I could feel the fear in it. "Who's up there?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My heart was racing in my chest, and the only thing I wanted to do was run. But where? There was nowhere to go. The door was locked, the windows were old and jammed shut. We were trapped. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. We weren't just staying in this house. We were stuck in it. And whatever was up there wasn't going to let us leave. The footsteps stopped. Complete silence followed, and for a moment, I thought I might have imagined them, that it was just my nerves getting the better of me. But then I heard it, a soft, almost inaudible whisper that came from the top of the stairs. "Come." I turned to Charlie, and he looked at me, his face pale as a ghost. "Dad, we have to go. We have to get out of here, now." His voice was frantic, and for the first time, I realized how much fear was in him. The kind of fear that wasn't just from the dark corners of the house. It was a fear born from something real, something tangible, something that knew we were there and didn't want us to leave. I nodded, grabbing his hand tightly. "We'll go back upstairs, get Emma, and we'll leave, no matter what." But when we turned to climb the stairs, that's when I saw it. The door to the basement was open. It hadn't been opened before. I knew it hadn't. I had closed it when we first came downstairs. But now it was ajar, the black void of the basement staring up at us like some kind of hungry mouth. The whispering came again. This time louder, clearer. Come, Charlie tugged at my sleeve. We shouldn't go down there. Something's down there, I can feel it. I wanted to agree. But I couldn't. Some force, some invisible pull, was drawing me toward it. Slowly, almost against my will, I found myself moving toward the basement. My hand reached out for the door. The instant my fingers brushed against the cold wood, the whispering stopped. Everything went silent. For a moment, I felt dizzy, disoriented. And then, a loud bang echoed from upstairs. Emma. We both froze. I had never heard her scream like that. It wasn't just a scream of fear, it was a scream of terror. The kind of scream that made your heart stop in your chest. I turned to Charlie, who was already pulling at my arm, shaking his head. "We need to go," he cried. "Now." But before we could move, something happened. The stairs creaked beneath us, and we both spun around. A shadow appeared at the top of the stairs, tall, dark, and moving toward us. It wasn't the woman we had seen earlier. No, this figure was different, taller, more imposing. And it wasn't walking. It was floating, gliding down the stairs with unnatural speed, moving too smoothly to be human. I grabbed Charlie, pulling him back, but the shadow didn't stop. It came closer, closer, its shape becoming clearer as it approached. The air grew colder, the temperature in the house dropping to an almost unbearable level. My breath came out in white puffs, and I could feel the sweat on my palms turning cold as I held onto Charlie. "Run," I whispered, my voice barely audible. We didn't need to be told twice. I yanked Charlie toward the front door, but it was too late. The shadow was already in front of us, blocking our path. And then, from the darkness of the hallway, the woman's voice echoed again, low and mocking. "You can't leave." I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing. We weren't leaving this place unless it let us. The house had become something more than just a building. It had become a trap. And whatever had been trapped, here, whatever dark thing had festered and grown in the shadows, was now awake. The figure reached out for us, and before I could react, I felt something cold and sharp brush against my skin. It wasn't a hand. It was like fingers made of ice, trailing along my arm with an unnatural force, pulling me toward the darkness. "Dad, no!" Charlie screamed, pulling at my other arm, but it felt like I was being torn in two, like the very foundation of the house was ripping us apart. The next thing I knew, I was sinking, not physically but into the darkness, into the cold, suffocating darkness that seemed to swallow everything whole. There was no sound anymore, no light, just the pressing, crushing weight of the darkness around us. And then I heard it. The sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, dragging, scraping their way through the blackness toward us. I wasn't sure if it was Emma or if it was the thing that had followed us here. But I knew one thing: whatever was in this house wasn't going to let us go without a fight. And we weren't going to leave until we faced it. The darkness around us felt alive, like it had weight, like it could wrap around you and squeeze every ounce of breath from your lungs. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel the cold, the presence of something standing just beyond the reach of the air. I reached out, but my hands grasped only emptiness. I couldn't feel Charlie anymore, couldn't hear his breathing, couldn't sense anything but the suffocating silence. Where had he gone? I wanted to call out to him, but my voice wouldn't come. It was like my mouth was frozen shut, like I was trapped in a nightmare where every part of me was being pulled apart, piece by piece. I tried to move, to stand, but it was as though my feet were rooted to the ground, trapped in something sticky and thick. Then, suddenly, a faint light appeared in the distance. It flickered like a dying candle, weak and trembling, but it was something, anything to give me direction. I moved toward it, dragging my feet through the suffocating dark. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath came out in shallow gasps, mixing with the cold air. Each step I took, the light seemed to pull further away, teasing me, as if it was just out of reach. The whispering began again, Come, come to us. I stopped in my tracks. The voice didn't sound like a person. It wasn't even human. It was something deeper, older, something that had always been here, in this house, waiting for the right moment. The more I listened, the clearer the voice became. It wasn't a command. It was invitation. An invitation to join the darkness, to be a part of it. I tried to ignore it, tried to force myself forward. I couldn't give in. Not now. The light grew brighter, more intense, and just as I thought I might finally reach it, it disappeared. Vanished into thin air, leaving nothing but an endless expanse of blackness. And then, I heard it, the sound of dragging footsteps. Heavy, slow, purposeful. I whipped around, heart leaping into my throat. Something was coming. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was here, and it was coming for me. There was no escaping it. Suddenly, I felt something brush past me. It wasn't a breeze or the shift of air, it was something solid. It was as if someone had just walked through me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, my pulse racing. I turned, but I couldn't see anything. And then, I felt a cold, clammy hand wrap around my wrist, pulling me backward. I screamed, but no sound came out. The hand was so cold, like ice, like death itself. The grip tightened, and I felt myself being yanked into the air, my body twisting and turning, spiraling into darkness. Panic gripped me, and I tried to fight, tried to break free, but I couldn't. My arms and legs were frozen in place, and all I could do was feel the crushing force of whatever was dragging me. Suddenly, I was slammed onto the ground. My vision spun, and when it cleared, I was in the basement. I didn't know how I had gotten there. 1 second, I was in the darkness, and the next, I was staring at the cold stone walls of the basement. The air smelled like rot, like something had been left to decay for far too long. I pushed myself up, looking around. The basement was vast, far bigger than I had imagined. And there, in the center, was a circle. A circle made of something dark, something viscous, like tar or blood. It was like a symbol, something ancient, drawn with intent. I wanted to back away, to run, but my legs felt like they were made of stone, and then I saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them, glowing from the shadows around me, watching, waiting. They weren't human eyes, not even animal eyes. They were something else, something far worse. They blinked slowly, one by one, as if they were aware of my every move, my every thought. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. My body trembled. The air around me felt thick, almost like it was pressing in, suffocating me. The eyes, they were closing in on me. I didn't know if they were moving or if I was, but everything started to spin, the world becoming a blur of motion. I tried to get my bearings, tried to stand, but then I felt something touch me. A hand, cold and long-fingered, brushed my arm. I jumped back, terrified, but I couldn't move fast enough. The hand gripped my wrist again, pulling me toward the circle. The whispering was back, louder, closer. Come. Join us. It was no longer a voice, but a chorus of hundreds of voices, all speaking in unison like a chant. I could feel the weight of their words pressing against my skull, filling my head until I couldn't think anymore. I was losing control. I was being pulled into the darkness, deeper and deeper, until there was nothing left but the sound of those voices, those eyes. But then, something snapped in my mind. I shook my head, trying to clear it, trying to hold on to myself. And just as I felt my mind starting to fracture, I remembered Charlie. I had to find him. I broke free of the grip. It wasn't easy. My legs felt like they were made of lead, and every step I took felt like I was wading through water. But I couldn't stop, not now. I couldn't let whatever was down here take my son. I turned, running toward the stairs. But when I reached the top of the basement stairs, I froze. At the foot of the stairs, standing still in the dark, was Charlie. His eyes were wide, his face pale. He wasn't moving. He wasn't even blinking. He was just standing there staring at me like he didn't recognize me. "Charlie." I called, but he didn't respond. He just kept staring, his face blank. Behind him I saw it, the shadow. It was moving again, and this time, it was coming for us both. The air around me thickened, and my pulse surged in my throat. I called Charlie's name again, but he didn't move. His body stood frozen at the top of the stairs, but his eyes were empty. The once familiar spark in them had been replaced with an unsettling void, a dark, hollow gaze that seemed to reach right through me, past me, into something much deeper, something I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I stepped forward, reaching out to him, my voice trembling. "Charlie, please, snap out of it. It's me, it's your dad." But there was no response. It was like he wasn't even there. He stood as if he were a doll, lifeless and unaware of his surroundings. I took another step toward him, and then I saw it, the shadow no longer just a figure, but something massive, something far more terrifying than I could ever have imagined shifted. Behind him, it wasn't moving as a man would. No, this thing slithered, its long limbs reaching, stretching, as if it were made from something that didn't obey the laws of nature. The sound of its movement was wet, like something dragging across the floor, like rotting flesh rubbing against cold stone. I felt the ground beneath my feet tremble as the thing crept closer. My body locked up in terror, but I couldn't let it take Charlie. I couldn't let this thing take my son. "Charlie, get away from it." I screamed, but my voice cracked, and it was swallowed by the heavy silence that filled the house. Shadow moved toward him, its presence suffocating the very air I was trying to breathe. It was only a few steps away now, so close I could feel the temperature drop around it, a coldness that made the air bite at my skin. Charlie still didn't move. I had no choice. I couldn't let the shadow touch him. I reached out, grabbing him by the shoulder, yanking him backward with all the strength I had. But as soon as my fingers made contact with his arm, a sickening, bone-chilling force surged through me. It felt like something sharp had pierced my very soul, and I stumbled back, gasping for air. The shadow had reached me. It had touched me. A sharp pain shot through my chest, and I gasped, falling to my knees, barely able to hold myself up. The world spun around me, each breath a struggle. And through the haze, I heard a voice. "Not your son. You cannot save him. You cannot save anyone." The voice came from all around, from within the walls, from within the ground beneath me. It was everywhere, inside my mind, inside my very bones. I looked up, and the shadow was no longer behind Charlie. It had taken him. He was gone. The hallway was emptied out. My heart thudded in my chest, and my hands shook as I tried to stand. I couldn't breathe. My body felt like it was being crushed from all sides. The house had swallowed him whole. And now, it was turning its attention to me. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. The house wanted all of us. With shaky hands, I pulled myself to my feet. I couldn't leave without him. I couldn't leave Charlie in that house, no matter what it took, no matter what I had to face. I was going to find him. The floorboards creaked beneath me as I moved, every step heavy, every breath more labored than the last. I couldn't tell where I was anymore. Couldn't tell if I was still in the hallway or if I had wandered into another room. It didn't matter. I had to find Charlie. The walls seemed to close in on me as I moved. I heard the scraping sound again, the sound that had been haunting us since we first stepped into this house. But it was louder now, closer. It wasn't just a noise anymore. It felt like something was alive in the walls, something watching me. A flicker of light caught my eye. I turned toward it. At the end of the hallway, the doll was sitting again. It had moved from the bottom of the stairs and was now in the middle of the hallway, facing me. Its small, porcelain face grinned up at me, and I could feel a dark, suffocating energy radiating off of it. I took a step toward it, But before I could reach it, I heard it, the footsteps. The sound was back. The dragging, slow, methodical footsteps. And they were close. I turned, my heart racing, my breath coming in sharp gasps. I wasn't alone. The shadow wasn't finished with me. I ran. My feet pounded against the floor. The walls seemed to stretch around me like the house itself was, shifting, trying to trap me. I needed to get to the front door. It was the only way out. But the closer I got, the harder it was to move. It was like something was weighing me down, slowing me, dragging me into the depths of the house. And then I saw a figure standing at the front door, blocking my way. It was Emma. She was standing still, her hair wild, her face pale and gaunt. Her eyes, those same empty eyes, stared back at me, unblinking. But there was something different about her now. Something wrong. She wasn't the same Dot, and then I heard the voice again. "It's too late." Emma's mouth opened, but what came out wasn't her voice. It was the whispering, that same voice that had followed us since we arrived. It echoed around me, twisting, blending with the voices of all the things that had ever been trapped in this house. I was not going to make it out. I couldn't breathe. The weight of the house, the shadows, and the voices, they all seemed to press down on me at once. Every inch of my body screamed to run, but the sight of Emma, of that thing wearing her face, kept me rooted in place. It was her, but it wasn't her. The hollow eyes, the way she stood there, unmoving, something inside me broke. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her what happened, how she had become like this, but the words never left my mouth. The whispering grew louder, more intense, suffocating. It wasn't just one voice now, it was an entire choir of agony and fear, overlapping and distorting, twisting my mind until I felt like I might lose it. "Charlie ... Emma. Please, this isn't you." I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. The sound of my words was lost to the growing cacophony of whispers. The temperature in the room dropped further, a biting cold that seeped into my skin, into my bones. Emma, or whatever was wearing her face, tilted her head, that same eerie, unblinking stare fixed on me. Her lips moved again, but it was the voice, that dreadful voice, that answered. "You can't save them. None of you will leave. Not now. Not ever." The floor beneath me creaked, and I knew that something was coming. Something was moving in the house, watching me, waiting for me to make the wrong move. The footsteps echoed again, dragging across the wooden floor, louder and faster. I turned my head, but the hallway stretched endlessly, like some twisted labyrinth. That would never let me escape. Get away from her. I shouted, desperate now, reaching out for her, as if my touch could somehow bring her back, as if I could snap her out of this nightmare, but she didn't respond. Instead, her hand reached out, her fingers cold, fingers that should have been warm, familiar. Her hand moved closer, slowly, methodically, until it was hovering just inches from my face. My heart raced, my hands trembling. The very air around me felt thick, suffocating, as if it were closing in on me, and I was trapped in its grip. Suddenly, the shadow moved. It surged from the darkness, faster than I could react, and in that moment, I realized it was not just one shadow. It was many, dozens of them, slithering, crawling from the corners of the room, from the walls, from the floor. Their forms twisted, amorphous and horrifying. They were drawn to Emma, to the thing that was once my wife. I couldn't stay here. I had to run, had to move. My legs moved on their own, instinct driving me forward, away from the nightmare that had overtaken Emma, away from the house, from everything. But the house was fighting back. The walls groaned as I ran, as though the house itself were alive, shifting and changing to keep me inside. The very air grew thicker with every step I took, heavier, like I was walking through thick, suffocating fog. Every turn I made seemed to lead me further into the maze of darkened hallways, and I knew deep down I wasn't just running from Emma. I was running from something far worse. I turned a corner, hoping for some kind of escape, but there was nothing. The hallway stretched on, endless, each door I passed more terrifying than the last. And then I heard it, the scraping. It was so close now, I could feel it vibrating through my bones. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a presence, something. That was closer than ever. It was in the walls, in the floor, in the air itself. I ran faster, my mind racing, my breath ragged. The footsteps were behind me now, and I knew I couldn't outrun them. The thing in the house was getting closer. Closer with every step. My heart hammered in my chest as I turned to look back. And there, in the dim light of the hallway, I saw it. The shadow dot, it wasn't just one shadow anymore. It had grown. It had multiplied. The shadows were everywhere, surrounding me, closing in from all sides. They moved like smoke, like something not bound by the rules of reality, and they were reaching for me. I stumbled, my feet slipping on the slick floor, but there was nowhere to go. The hallway seemed to stretch on forever, like the house itself was folding in on me. There was no exit, no way out. And then I felt it, cold fingers wrapped around my ankle, pulling me down. I screamed, but it was a sound swallowed by the walls, the whispers, the noise of the house that was alive. The shadows surged around me, dragging me into the darkness. No! I screamed, but it was too late. I felt myself being pulled down into the cold, the dark. And then, a voice deep and guttural whispered in my ear, "Welcome home." And everything went black. I woke up, but I didn't know where I was. The air was still heavy, the suffocating cold that had taken over. The house clinging to my skin like a second layer. The ground beneath me was damp, slick with something I couldn't identify. I tried to move, but my body felt numb, like I was still trapped in that nightmare. I blinked, trying to focus. There was no light, only shadows that seemed to crawl across the walls, moving of their own accord. They stretched and twisted like living things, and in the darkness, I could hear the faintest whispers, those same voices that had tormented me ever since we set foot in this house. I wasn't in the hallway anymore. This wasn't even the room where I had been dragged. The walls were made of stone, rough and uneven, and the air smelled of decay. I could barely make out the shape of the space around me. It felt old, ancient, like something that had been hidden for years, waiting for the right moment to surface. I tried to push myself to my feet, but as soon as I moved, I felt a sharp pain shoot through my head, and I collapsed back down. The ground beneath me wasn't hard, but soft, like something alive was breathing beneath it. Every time I tried to get up, it felt like the floor was pulling me back down, dragging me into its depths. I couldn't stay here. I needed to get out. I needed to find Charlie, find Emma, find any trace of them before it was too late. I pushed against the floor again, this time forcing myself to sit up. The dizziness threatened to overtake me, but I fought it off. Slowly, I dragged myself to my feet, feeling the cold, damp stone against my palms as I stood. The whispers grew louder. And this time I understood them. You shouldn't have come. You cannot leave. You will never leave. I froze. It wasn't just the house that was speaking. It was something else, something older, more ancient than anything I could fathom. The voices seemed to come from the walls themselves, from the ground, from the very air I breathed. They belonged to us. All of them. And now ... you do too. I turned quickly, my heart racing. The walls seemed to move, shifting like liquid, bending in unnatural angles. The stone beneath me seemed to groan, as though the house itself was alive, breathing with its own dark, twisted rhythm. I had to move. I had to get out. I stumbled forward, my feet unsteady, my head spinning. The further I moved, the darker it got, until I could barely see my own hands in front of my face. The only sound was the echoes of my footsteps, but even those seemed wrong. The echoes were distorted, twisted like something was mimicking my every movement. following me. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to keep moving. I needed to find a door, a window, anything that could lead me back to the outside dot as I moved through the darkness. I heard a sound behind me, a scraping, slow and methodical, like nails dragging across wood. I didn't need to look to know what it was. The shadow was following me. It was close. I could feel its presence. It wasn't just one shadow anymore. It had multiplied again, now a swirling mass of darkness, a swirling nightmare that moved with purpose. I picked up my pace, but the sound grew louder, closer. It was following me, stalking me, never stopping. I rounded a corner, hoping for some kind of escape, but the hallway stretched on forever. The walls seemed to pulse, the air thickening with the stench of rot. Then I saw a door. It was at the end of the corridor, just barely visible in the dim light. A single fragile hope. I sprinted toward it, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows rushed forward behind me, and the scraping noise turned into a maddening screech, like something being dragged across glass. I reached the door and yanked it open, only to be met with more darkness. But beyond it, beyond the endless abyss, was something I couldn't comprehend. It was a vast space, a cavern, stretching far beyond anything I had seen in the house. The air was thick with the stench of decay and something worse. And in the center of the cavern, illuminated by a pale, sickly light, was the doll, the same doll that had appeared in the hallway, in Emma's hands on the bed. It sat there, waiting. Its porcelain face grinned up at me, an expression that sent a chill down my spine. A voice echoed from the darkness. "It's too late. You cannot undo what's been done." I stepped back, my pulse racing. I couldn't go forward. I couldn't take another step. The shadows were closing in on me, faster now, suffocating, and I realized too late that the door was closing. No, not closing. Melting back into the stone walls, as if it had never been there at all. I turned, desperate to run, but there was nowhere to go. The shadow was everywhere, enveloping me, surrounding me, pulling me toward the darkness. And in that final moment, I understood. The house wasn't just a house, it was a prison. It had always been a prison, and now I was part of it. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the doll, its grin wider now, its eyes alive with hunger. The world felt like it was collapsing around me. I was no longer in control of my body or my mind. The darkness consumed me, pulling me deeper into the house, into the very heart of its suffocating grip. I could feel its cold, creeping fingers around my limbs, dragging me down, further down into the depths. It was as if the house had no end, no floor beneath me, just an endless void that would swallow me whole. I tried to scream, but my voice was swallowed by the shadows, by the air itself. The house was alive, and it was feeding on my fear, on my despair. The walls whispered, the floors moaned, and in the distance, I could hear the faintest echoes of Charlie, his voice, soft, calling to me. But I couldn't reach him. I couldn't save him, not anymore. You cannot save him. You cannot save anyone, the voice of the house whispered, its presence all around me. The voice was familiar now, as if it had always been a part of me, a part of this house. I had come to understand something terrible. It wasn't just trapping us. It was feeding on us, on our souls, on our very essence. And the house was hungry. I stumbled forward, trying to find my footing, but the ground beneath me shifted, undulating like water. I felt like I was being pulled through the floor, sinking into the house itself. The shadows around me were thick, pulsating, alive. They stretched toward me, whispering my name, trying to drag me into their embrace. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped my wrist. I recoiled, but it held me tightly, the touch freezing, sending a shock of terror through my body. I looked down, but there was no one there, just the shadows, swirling, blending into one another. Then I heard the voice again, not from behind me, but from deep within. from somewhere inside me. There's nowhere to run, no place to hide. We are all one now. I shook my head, desperately trying to break free from the grip. But the hand didn't let go. It was pulling me deeper into the darkness, pulling me toward the center of the house, where the light barely reached, where the shadows seemed to have gathered, waiting. The voice grew louder, as though it was coming from every direction. You were always meant to be here. The house needs you, just as it needs all of them. And then I saw it dot in the distance, barely visible in the ever-thickening shadows. I saw Charlie, his face, pale and lifeless, his eyes wide and empty, staring back at me. He stood motionless, just like before, but now there was something wrong with him, something grotesque. His body was contorted, twisted in ways it shouldn't have been, and the shadows seemed to crawl up his legs, wrapping around him like chains. Couldn't breathe. I reached out to him, but the shadows wrapped tighter around my wrist, pulling me back, forcing me to look away. I tried to scream, but my throat was dry, and all that came out was a raspy gasp. "No, no, Charlie." I screamed, but the words felt hollow, empty, as though they had no meaning here. The house didn't care. It didn't care about anything. Whispers grew louder. The walls seemed to pulse, thrumming with an energy that vibrated in my bones. The shadows tightened around me, drawing me closer to the center, to the heart of the house, where the worst of it awaited. It wasn't just Charlie anymore. It wasn't just Emma. It was everyone who had ever walked through this door. You are part of it now. I could feel the weight of those words pressing against me, pushing me further down. The shadows seemed to grow more distinct now, forming shapes I couldn't quite make out, but I could feel their eyes on me. They were watching, waiting, hungry. And then out of nowhere, the house shifted. The walls trembled, groaning as if they were alive, stretching and bending to reveal a door. A massive, wooden door, its surface covered in strange symbols that pulsed with an unnatural light. I could hear the low hum of it, a sound deep in my chest. It was calling to me. I staggered toward it, pulled by some unseen force. The shadows tried to stop me, tried to hold me back, but I pushed through, determined. I had to know what was behind that door. I had to find Charlie, even if it meant facing the house's true heart, the thing that had been pulling us all in. I reached for the door handle, my hand trembling, and as soon as I touched it, a shock ran through me, sharp and painful, as though I had touched pure electricity. But I didn't pull away. I couldn't. The door slowly creaked open, revealing the darkness inside. Beyond it, in the eerie glow of the symbols, I saw them. Hundreds of faces, their eyes wide, staring out from the darkness. But they weren't just faces, they were trapped. Souls, their bodies suspended in midair, as if the house had captured them, stolen them from the world, and trapped them here. They all looked at me. They all knew me. "Welcome home," they whispered in unison. I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating. The cold, the shadows, the faces, they were closing in on me, and I knew with absolute certainty that there was no way out. This house, this place had claimed us all, and we would never leave.